Stein Jr. é um coach de alta performance e autor. Iniciou a sua carreira como treinador de performance do basquete, onde trabalhou com estrelas da NBA como Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry e Kobe Bryant. Hoje em dia ajuda empresas com os seus programas e estratégias para sucesso, seguindo os princípios que aplicou com atletas de alta competição. Recentemente publicou também o seu livro Raise Your Game, que me viciou desde o primeiro dia de leitura. Prepara-te para dicas muito boas para a tua vida e carreira. Stein Jr. para o podcast dos meus heróis. How much of what we are being fed by the media is true, though? I mean, I don't know. I never know. You know,
it is. It's so hard. I mean, I don't know if the news outlets you have are as polarized as ours. I mean, what I find fascinating, you can watch something like Fox News then watch the exact same story on CNN, and they're reporting on the same thing, and you wouldn't even know it's the same story. They've got everything completely biased. So yeah, it's really tough to source good information. But, one thing I've always said, I mean, on some level, I do think most news outlets at least promote some version of the truth. But the problem is they only really talk about the negative stuff. It's the percentages of positive stuff I don't think is shared fairly. And that's the issue. So it's not to say that the stuff that they're reporting isn't true, but they don't back it up with as many things that are true as possible. And I've always been a believer for, every bad thing that goes on, there's probably several good things that are going on, but no one's reporting those. And that's where we can feel like the whole world is about to end because we're only hearing the bad stuff. And that's why I pretty much cut off all news outlets. I try to stay informed, but I don't subject myself to the negativity.
Do you already have some sort of schedule? Like, okay, I'm going to read my emails from 10 to 12 and not going to worry about emails anymore. And I have a fixed schedule for looking at my cell phone. Do you already have those kinds of rules with yourself or not so much?
It's not that specific or that rigid. For the most part, what I try to do is protect the first 60 minutes every morning when I wake up. And I do my very best. I don't look at anything on my phone with the exception of a Headspace app. So I do follow a guided meditation every morning, but I don't check my text messages or emails or look at social until I've basically done the first 60 minutes of my day. And I've turned all notifications off. So I'm not getting any beeps or rings or dings. I'm not even getting the little red circles of notifications. I check everything manually. So for me, especially now where I don't necessarily have anything pressing very early in the morning, I don't set an alarm. So I just wake up when my body naturally wakes up, which for me could be anywhere from 5:30 to 7 in the morning. I'm a pretty natural early riser.
Nice.
And then I make my bed. I drink some water just to rehydrate. I follow a 10-minute guided meditation. I do some light stretching, and then most days of the week do some type of exercise. Whether it's a 2 or 3 mile run or it's some body weight strength work, so I get something that gets me moving and, then take a shower and get ready to start my day. And by that time, I feel like I've set the foundation that makes me much more resilient, that no matter what I see moving forward, I have a better perspective in handling it. So, sometimes I check email 10 times a day, sometimes twice. It really just depends on what's going on. But my goal is never to be a slave to any of those things, that I'm using email and I'm using social media in a way that is in alignment with what I'm trying to do. I'm not at the mercy of them is at least the goal, but that is certainly harder than I'm making it sound.
Yeah, because I grew up thinking that, and martial arts and being a stuntman actually gave me this, which is you got to be you can't go all the way all the time. I mean, you even when you're working out and when you're doing stuff. For example, the biggest example I use, and it's very literal for the stuntman profession. You don't just have to do a backflip. You have to do a backflip in the worst case scenario. So they're going to give you heavy ass boots. They're going to give you a hat. They're going to give you a full wardrobe that's going to be very, very heavy. So whenever people come to me and speak about, I'm going to work out really hard, or I'm going to do everything like 10 times a day, or do twice a day workouts and 10 times a week workouts, that's what I meant. I mean, people have to be wary of having a little bit of gas in the tank whenever they finish each workout, whenever they do anything, because it's always a long-term commitment. It's never you can't be too intense with anything you do, otherwise you're not going to be able to do it in the long run. Do you feel that's something that you have to sometimes stop yourself before you start doing a lot at once?
Oh, absolutely. No. And having spent so much time in the strength and performance profession, and then now applying those to my current work, I have so much more value on rest and recovery and regeneration, and not just for the body, but for the mind as well. So, if I know that today is going to be a really intense and hard workout, then I know that tomorrow and maybe even the next day will be much lower intensity, or might be a full rest day, or might just do some foam rolling and some stretching. That the higher the intensity you go, that has to be followed by appropriate rest. Now, if I'm going to do things at a submaximal level, so more lighter to medium intensity, then you can do those things usually most days of the week. So you just have to balance, intensity of effort and volume with making sure you're getting rest. Because as you just pointed out so perfectly, if you're going as hard as you can every single day, you're going to burn out. You're going to get injured. You're going to stagnate. So yeah, that part's important. And for me, I'm 44 years old, so I've been doing this long enough that I'm pretty well tuned with my body. And while I might have a general idea of a workout program to follow for a week or for a month, I do everything based on feel. And if I'm feeling a little bit sluggish and I'm feeling a little bit sore, or maybe something in my knee or lower back is a little bit off, and I'm supposed to do a 5-mile run that day, I may change it. I may do a shorter run, or I may postpone it a day. I don't stick to being very rigid to any plan that's put in place. I listen to my body. Conversely, if I wake up on a day and I am feeling great, I'm feeling well rested, I'm feeling energized, I'm ready to go, and maybe I was only planning on running a couple of miles that day, I might do more because I'm feeling really well. So for me, it's all about listening to my body. Now, of course, keep in mind, I'm just trying to stay mentally, physically, and emotionally fit so that I can continue to do my job well. I can be a present and active father to my children, so that I feel like I look good. I'm not training for a movie or training for a season of games. So my training is certainly a little bit different than, say, a professional athlete or an actor, or someone that has to be in peak physical condition for a very specific event. So I have the luxury of being able to take it day by day and say, hey, on the days I feel great, I'll do a little bit more. On the days I don't feel great, I'll do the best I can with what I have at that time.
So I first heard about you in the Power Athlete podcast, which I love, with John Wellborn and Luke and Tex. And they were talking to you about the simplicity, and you were always talking about the basics always being what's most important. But I would never let this conversation carry through without you telling us a little bit about your background. Can you tell us a little bit about your life story and how you got to where you are today?
Certainly. So basketball was actually my first identifiable passion, and I fell in love with the game at 4 or 5 years old. And the only reason that's important is here 40 years later, basketball is still a major pillar in my life in so many different ways. And I'm so thankful and grateful that I've been able to build a life around something that I've always been very passionate about. And I was a pretty good player as a kid, and pretty good high school player. I was able to play at a small college down in North Carolina. And during the latter parts of high school and then throughout college, I started to develop an equal love for strength and conditioning and fitness and performance and nutrition. And when I graduated from college in 1998, I knew that the best route for me was to combine my original love of basketball with my new love of strength and conditioning and performance training. And I decided to become a basketball performance coach. And I did that for almost 20 years, from fresh out of college till up until 4 years ago, and worked mostly at the youth and high school level, primarily because that's where I thought I could make the biggest impact. But I happen to work at 2 high schools here in the Washington, D.C. area that have produced over a dozen players in the NBA. So these are not your typical and normal high schools. These are internationally renowned schools that had some really, really, really great talent. So I got to work on my craft with really elite level athletes, and being able to be in those two, work at those 2 programs, that opened doors with Nike basketball, with Jordan Brand, with USA basketball, and got me some opportunities where I could work events for guys like LeBron James and Stephen Curry and Kobe Bryant and Steve Nash. So I got a chance to work with guys like Kevin Durant and Victor Oladipo when they were teenagers. And I got a chance to work with the guys I just named once they were already proven NBA stars. So I've been able to see kind of the before and the after of what it takes to be an elite level basketball player. And then 4 years ago, I decided to make a pivot off the court and into the boardroom and onto stages as a professional speaker. And I teach businesses and organizations how to utilize those same strategies that athletes use so that they can become the best at their business and their industry, and create the same type of culture and habits and mindsets. So that's why basketball is still very close to me, because it's directly related to everything that I teach now, even though I don't do very much training in the space outside of what I do with my own self just to stay in good shape. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey. I've long been fascinated with the crossover between sport and business. And, while obviously the specifics of what someone like a Kobe Bryant needed to do to be a great player is not identical to what a CEO needs to do to be a great CEO, but the foundation and the basics and the fundamentals are the exact same. The principles and strategies are the same. The mindsets and disciplines, all of that stuff is the same. So that's really what I do now is teach people how to apply those lessons to their life and to their work. And it's universal. It doesn't matter if you're trying to become a better CEO, if you're trying to become a better stunt person. It doesn't matter if you're trying to become a better parent. All of these principles have very high transfer.
Yeah, but everything crosses over. I mean, that's what was great about learning stuff like CrossFit or something. You can actually see how the lines will cross. And one of my heroes, Bruce Lee, was saying that in the 70s. So it's like it's really interesting to see if you're eclectic enough, you will get the message. Either it's from either if it's from basketball or if it's from martial arts or anything like that. Because I don't really follow basketball that much, and I really got interested in what you do, especially now reading your book. So congrats on your book, because it's really, you're like an assembler that it's a great assembly of what performance is. So I would really put your book, and not to toot your own horn, but I would put your book alongside those books of Dale Carnegie, for example, How to Make Friends and Influence Other People, because they're really a mix of what you should know about yourself and others and how to treat other people. But this one is actually a bigger, I would say, a more broader almanac of what you should do if you want your performance to rise. And everything is there. Like from everything, like self-awareness. I love the chapter on self-awareness. Sorry, my English sometimes stutters.
Your English is great. Your English is really, really good.
A lot of movies.
Probably better than mine.
You know what's good about us in Portuguese is that we subtitle the movies instead of just dubbing them. So whenever I go to other European countries and I want to speak some English, sometimes they have a harder time than us speaking English because they always had everything dubbed. So I guess it was good for us. Awesome. One thing that I noticed is that you said that one of the major keys or one of the major assets for the 21st century will be the ability to focus and to be able to concentrate on your field or what you like or your passion, never minding the noise like the social network and the media and whatever. But sometimes I feel that this, I'm not going to say society, but the world we live in right now is kind of benefiting people who do a little bit of everything. Like, for example, if I were only a personal trainer, I would have never gotten as far as I did with my audience, because my communication skills or whatever, or my being a stuntman is actually a way of proving my fitness as well. So I believe everything can be really merged. But is there a way to figure out the fine line between you focusing on just one task or specializing, or being more of a eclectic soul that gathers a lot from a lot of areas?
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad that you want to go in this direction. This will be a fun portion of our conversation. First, I thank you so much for your kind words about the book. You know, the way I look at it, and then I will answer your question. The way I look at it, for any of us that are trying to put out content in the world, which you do a tremendous job of, we can either be creators or we can be curators. And the book, Raise Your Game, certainly it has some personal stories. It has my vantage point. But as you just mentioned, a lot of what's in the book, I've just curated from other people. And there is a value in that. When you take a Zig Ziglar or a Brian Tracy or a Jim Rohn or a Tony Robbins, these are guys that have been saying this stuff before I was born. And I would put a lot of those guys as original thinkers and creators of a lot of the stuff in the self-development space and leadership space that guys like you and I read. And I'm not trying to, as they say, reinvent the wheel. I recognize that most of what I have to share, I was taught by someone, or I learned through reading or watching or observing, what have you. And my goal is to package it in a way that can resonate with a new audience. Because you may listen to a book by Jim Rohn, and the way that he says it doesn't really strike a chord with you. And then I can take what he says, package it a little bit different, and it does strike a chord. So I think there's a lot of value in not just creating content, but in being able to curate it as well. Because I've had a lot of people say, go ahead.
In that sense, I would never take away from your communication skills and the way you actually portray that. I mean, I meant the research work was amazing, but still, it's in your own words, which gives it a little, a lot more flavor, actually. So that's what I meant as well. I wouldn't want to take away from
I took
any.
It as a compliment.
Okay.
I appreciate it so much, and the reason I bring that up is there's lots of times, especially younger folks, they almost think to themselves, who am I to say this, or who am I to share this, or what do I really have that's of value? And the point that I want to bring up is that you're the only person that can bring in information, package it, and then put it back out in your specific way, that it's going to have your flair, it's going to have your perspective, it's going to have your twist on it. And that's really, really important for folks to be able to do that. I don't want people to feel that they have to have this pressure of coming up with brand new ideas all of the time. For the most part, most of what's shared in today's world is recycled or borrowed from someone else.
Exactly.
I mean, look how many times somebody is quoting Bruce Lee, or quoting John Wooden, or quoting, Tony Robbins. A lot of those folks started some ideas. And to be quite honest, they most likely weren't the originators of a lot of those ideas. You can go back, hundreds of years, and you've got people like Socrates and different philosophers who came up with concepts. So I think what's most important is for folks to be able to always sift through new information, be open to learning as much as they can, and then figure out ways to kind of repackage that in an individual and customized way that that is going to be of value to your audience. And when you get good at being able to take in information and then share what you believe is most important with the folks that follow you, there's a skill involved in that, and that part's important. I would like to believe that if someone reads Raise Your Game, then that means they don't have to read the hundreds of books that I've read in order to be able to write Raise Your Game. Now, exactly. I'm not saying that to discourage them. I would still encourage that they read those other books. But I think that's one of the beauties in today's day and age, is to be able to curate content. So no, I actually am very, very thankful for your kind words, and I'm glad that you recognize that. As far as your question about, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's basically the difference between being a specialist and being a generalist.
Yeah,
And
without
I do
becoming,
believe,
being a generalist, without becoming a what do you call it, jack of all trades and master of none.
yes,
Without becoming
yes,
someone who
absolutely.
puts their mouth and hands in everything without actually ever being a tenth of an expert in anything, which we don't want, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I have a few thoughts on that, and I've read the book Range,
Hmm.
which is about, we tend to now, most people believe that being a specialist is in your best interest, and I do think parts of that are true, and I think there are certain circumstances where being a specialist is in your best interest. But then I also think there's a lot of value on the generalist side, and if I could summarize, I would say, and I think this is in alignment with the core theme of Range, especially when you're younger, you should try to expose yourself to as many different things as possible. You should try as many things as possible, really get a feel for what you're good at, get a feel for what you like to do, where do your interests and passions lie. So I think when you're younger, the more skill sets that you can work on in a variety of different ways, the more that'll help you when you do choose to focus on something when you're older. Now, I think when it comes to kind of the jack of all trades that you just brought up, I do believe that if you have kind of this pinpoint, so you take what you're really good at and what you're passionate about, and you find where those two things intersect. And let's just say for you, that's fitness. That's the intersection that has to do with fitness. Well, there's so many things that surround fitness that I have no doubt that you could be really, really good in. So it's not like you're just going to be in one aspect of fitness, as you just said. So not just a personal trainer, but on some level, I would imagine, and I don't know a lot about your craft, but I would imagine there's a high fitness component to being a stuntman.
Oh yeah.
So stuntman and fitness are very tied together.
Oh
And then
yeah.
even in fitness, you can be a personal trainer, or you can also be someone that shares fitness information through a
Mhm.
YouTube channel and through Instagram and through podcasting. So just even in fitness, there's several things around there that I'm sure you prove it, are doing an amazing job of. So it's not like you have one job title, but they are in the same, I guess, realm. So it's not like you're doing fitness and then you also have an accounting practice and then you're also working on becoming a doctor and then you also decide to coach little league, where you're starting to spread yourself out. Same thing for me. At present, I guess my title is keynote speaker and author, but I still consider myself a coach. But instead of coaching basketball players on performance, I'm now coaching executives and entrepreneurs on how they can improve their businesses. So same thing. My dot is coaching and filling other people's buckets and helping them improve performance. But the way at which I do that has shifted a little bit. So once again, I'm not trying to go into several different industries and be an expert in all of those. I'm staying to my core industry and my core genre and working on that, but it certainly can expand to several different roles. And even for myself, as a coach and as a speaker and as an author, that's where I want to spend most of my time. So I hire people that help me with graphic design, and someone to do my website, and someone to do, because those are not areas. First of all, I'm not very qualified in those areas, but I also, every moment that I would spend trying to get good at doing those things would be time that I'm not spending on becoming a better coach, a better speaker, or a better author. So I outsource anything that is not in my direct vision. And
Mhm.
for me, that's where I think it's a little bit of both. I don't consider myself, and I certainly don't consider you, one dimensional, but I think we've both found our calling and we stay pretty close to that. But that allows us some flexibility to do other things.
Oh yeah, even if we are working on other traits that might actually help, and sometimes even as a content creator, as a YouTuber, and a YouTuber. I still have a hard time calling myself a YouTuber because
I love it.
it's like a kid's game, like this thing that kind of bothers me right nowadays. It's like everybody's looking for the next challenge, and YouTube is all full of challenge, like the 30-day carnivore challenge, the 30-day vegan challenge, the 10,000 calorie a day challenge. It's like, why can't you do anything in a mid range? I mean, in a gray area, instead of going like it's black, it's white. Everybody's going to the extremes. So I really believe that. I really believe the ability to focus, even if you gather stuff from other places, your ability to focus will be the main asset for the 21st century. When I read that, I was like, oh yeah, damn, that's it. So you really articulated it perfectly. Yes.
What you just also said that just sparked something else so brilliantly is that even though, let's say your target on the bullseye is fitness, and then around fitness you have being a stuntman, you have being a YouTuber, you have these other things, and mine is coaching, and around that I have keynote speaking and being an author. So even though those are our direct focal points, guys like you and I very much should try to learn from other industries. We should try to learn, I should be trying to learn everything I can from you and what it takes to be an elite level stuntman and an elite level fitness professional and elite level YouTuber. Because even though I'm not going to be those things, there are things that you're doing that I can apply to what it is that I do, and vice versa. The best example that I use all of the time is, so as a professional speaker, I'm basically a paid orator. People pay me to come speak to their groups. Well, there's two other paid orator art forms that I have a strong attraction to. One is hip hop music, and the other is stand-up comedy. Now, I'm never going to be a rapper, and I'm never going to be a stand-up comedian.
Oh,
and
you're
I'm
into
okay
hip
with
hop.
that. Yeah,
Nice.
I love hip hop, and I can.
What
and
type
I
of
can
hip hop do
study
you
both
listen
of
to?
those.
What kind of bands do you listen
Because
to?
I'm 44, I'm more of an old school
Old
guy.
school,
So
yes.
I like most of the stuff that came out in the 90s and even the early 2000s. I found it was more of a pure art form back then, where it was just kind of a hard beat and really good lyrics.
What, Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Jungle Brothers, Black Sheep? Please go this way.
Absolutely. Well, Tribe Called Quest was a big one. Absolutely love Tribe Called Quest. But I mean, everything. I mean, even, starting with kind of NWA and Ice Cube.
Oh, yeah.
And then, Biggie and Tupac, and then Jay-Z and Eminem. Anyone in that genre, I just found to be, it was just such a raw and pure form of expression. And, certainly with hip hop, very similar to stand-up comedy. When I'm watching both of those art forms, I'm learning about tonality and how important it is to use physicality and your facial expressions and your body language and, your volume and your pitch and how long you pause. And obviously with hip hop, there's a certain rhythm to the way that they express themselves. So all of that stuff is stuff that I believe I can learn from and then apply to my current craft as a keynote speaker.
How do you get less nervous to speak in public? Or do you ever not get nervous, just get around the techniques and the tools?
It's both. I choose to use the word excited instead of nervous. And I don't know if that's just verbal semantics, but, I definitely get a little bit of the butterflies in my stomach before I take the stage, but I want that. That's a good thing. That shows me that I still care. And when I'm speaking, what I care most about is the audience and making sure that I'm giving them something of value. And I don't ever want to miss on that. So it has nothing to do with, whether I think I'm doing a good job or did I nail that talk or did I say it perfectly. What matters most to me is that it's impactful to the audience and that it exceeded their expectations and that they got something out of it. So in order to help lessen some of the potential nervousness, it's all about preparation. And I go to great lengths to make sure that I study the company that I'm going to speak to or the audience. I find out what's most important to them. What are the pain points that they're having? What are the biggest challenges that they're having? What are the things that they'd like to be able to do differently when I'm done talking? And I really want to customize every single presentation, so it's very specific to that audience. Now, with that said, there are some major pillars and some major stories and lessons that I share universally with every audience because I believe they apply. But then on top of that, I make sure that I customize it specifically. So if there was an annual conference of stuntmen where the best stuntmen in the world all came to Las Vegas, and I was giving that talk, it would not be identical to a talk that I would give in another industry to another group. There'd be some things that are probably similar, but then there'd be some things that I would want to speak the language of those that would be in the audience. And with that preparation, and the more I can prepare and the more I rehearse, then the more I feel ready to go out there and serve that audience. And that turns what would be anxiety and nervousness into a very healthy excitement. And I live for that. It makes me feel alive. I love that challenge and really enjoy doing that.
Because I think it was Bob Hope that hosted the Oscars. Like, I think it was 19 times. 19 times somebody hosted the Oscars, and I was like, "What?" He started like in 1939 or something, and I got to think of myself. I'm myself a very huge fan of stand-up comedy, and I kind of tried to study or try to study in my own way how a host would present himself. And I watched especially in an event like the Oscars where everybody in the world is looking at you, or the halftime show for Super Bowl, everybody's looking at you. How would I prepare, or how would I do it? I like to do that sort of game with myself. And I'm like, I don't think in the 19th time that Bob Hope was less nervous. He just knew how to deal with nervousness, which is quite different, I sometimes think about that myself. And another great story that I had with a friend of mine was like when I saw Matthew McConaughey win his Oscar for the Dallas Buyers Club. The part where he lost a ton of weight and stuff. His speech was so prepared, so prepared that you were like, it's like he was reading it. It was so acted out, it was so prepared. And then I asked a friend of mine who is all into, he's very much into Tony Robbins and performance coaching and whatnot. And I told him I didn't like his speech too much. Back then I told him that because it's too prepared. It's like he knew he was going to win and he was acting it the whole time through. It's like he was reading it. It's like he wrote it like bit by bit and comma by comma. And my friend was like, "Of course, you always get ready for success." And I was like, oh shit. Of course, yeah. That makes sense. Of course you would get ready for when you would be successful. Are there a lot of people who are not ready for success? I mean, it's like their mindset is shorter than what they are able to actually accomplish in the real world. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure. It absolutely does. And what you were saying with McConaughey's acceptance speech, there's an old adage that says you're always better off to be prepared for an opportunity that never arises than unprepared for one that does. So my guess is he probably said to himself, look, just in case I win, I want to make sure I'm prepared to give the best speech that I can. And I would rather be all ready and then not win than to win and not be ready. So I think from a mindset standpoint, and I would say that to basketball players all the time, when you've got the 10th or 11th man on a team that usually don't play very many minutes, and I tell them, hey, you still need to be ready. I know that you haven't played in the last 3 games, but if you're not ready when coach finally calls your number, first of all, you're going to let the team down. Mm-hmm. But second of all, the chances of you getting that opportunity again are very, very limited. So you need to be prepared mentally, physically, and emotionally as if you're going to get into every single game and be ready. Be watching the game, get into the flow of the game, because you kind of need to be there before you get there. And that's really, really important. And yeah, I think when it comes to success, first of all, each and every one of us should be defining success for ourselves. Mm-hmm. I do believe that's one of the mistakes that people make is they kind of take this societal definition of success, which many times has to do with how much money you make, or what house you have or cars you have or what your job title is or how many followers you have. And if someone chooses to use those metrics as their definition of success, that's fine. But I don't allow anyone else to define my success. I define it, and I make sure that I'm living in alignment with what I consider to be successful. And it is. I also don't view success as an end destination. I view it as a constant journey. And here is the man that I want to become, next year, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. And then I just make sure that all of the decisions I make are in alignment with becoming that person. And when I make a mistake, I step out of bounds, I make a poor decision, then I just learn from it. And then I regroup and I make sure that the next decision is a better one. And the reason I bring that up is I think the pitfalls to success are some people don't define it for themselves. Mm-hmm. They just go based off what everyone else says. And then they don't prepare for it. They don't make decisions in alignment with that. And, to me, that's what's most important. You need to have a crystal vision of who you want to become, what you want to accomplish, where you want to go. And then you need to make sure that what you do on a daily basis is getting you a little bit closer to all of those things. If my goal 10 years from now is to be mentally, physically, and emotionally fit, well, what I do today is either going to take me a little bit closer to that, or it's going to take me a little bit further away. And obviously, every day of my life, I want to inch a little bit closer to becoming the best version of myself. And that means, from what I choose to eat for lunch to who I follow on Instagram, I want to make sure those things are lining up to put me on a path to be the best version of myself. And that's where I think a lot of people fall short. They don't even know where they're trying to go. They don't know what it'll look like when they get there. And then they certainly don't know how to prepare for it.
Because sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap of putting garbage in your head the whole day, right?
Very easy.
Like putting
there's no
poison.
shortage of it. There's plenty of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you elaborate a little more on what does a basketball team's performance coach do? I mean, is it on the mindset? I'm sure it is, obviously, but is it also on the physical side? Do you take them to the gym? Are you a strength and conditioning coach as well?
Yeah, well, when it started, performance coach, for the most part, focused mostly on the body. And it was mostly on improving athleticism, getting them physically fit, in basketball shape, getting them stronger and more conditioned. But then over time, everyone in our profession started to realize that the actual key to the physical was the mental. And if you didn't have the right mindset and disciplines and grit and perspective and approach, then you'd never be able to maximize the physical. So then performance coach really started to integrate both. And you certainly have specialists on either end. I mean, if you were to take an NBA team today, they have athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches, but they also have mental skills coaches and psychologists, and then they have nutritionists and they have massage therapists. They have an entire team of people that really specializes in a very narrow part of wellness and fitness. And then collectively, they all work together. For me, when I was working at the high school level, we didn't have all of those different positions, so I would wear a few different hats. But for me, it was, yes, a very direct connection between mind and body. Because it doesn't matter how fit you are or how athletic you are, if you don't have a winner's mindset or you don't have a winner's discipline, then you're going to put a ceiling on what you can do physically. And those things are so interconnected, I don't even think you can separate them.
So what type of sessions did you have when you first started with the players?
They were mostly physical sessions, at least in presentation, but there was always a mental component going into it. So while most of what we might be going through was physical, so they're going to do a set of lunges or a set of pull-ups or this vertical jump drill. But then when I'm speaking to them and I'm coaching them and I'm talking to them, that's mostly about the mental side. And I wanted to make sure that, while their bodies were going through a workout, I wanted to make sure that their minds and their hearts were going through a workout as well. And a lot of that had to do with the coaching. But, we would do forms of meditation or visualization,
Wow.
or we would incorporate both together and do, a yoga type practice where you're really trying to connect mind and body. And those were the things that were ultimately most important. The mind gives up well before the body does in most cases. In most cases, when you're running, and if you're running a marathon and around mile 17 or 18, when things really start getting hard, it's usually the mind that says, I can't go anymore. It's not the body. Your body might be sore and you might be tired and you might be breathing heavy, but your body could definitely run the next several miles. It's your mind that gives up first. And, to me, that's the area that all of us should be focused on improving, is the getting rid of limiting beliefs and the mental capacity we have to improve ourselves. And that's really what makes the elite the elite. They combine their body, their mind, and their heart and their spirit all together for maximum performance. So it's not just one area. They look at it from a very holistic approach.
How cool was The Last Dance?
Oh, I had a blast watching that. At 44, those prime years of Michael Jordan was when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
So the ability to watch them, I mean, it was so neat. It brought back so many really good visceral memories I had from being a kid.
Why did you
and
start?
It's also
Why did you start playing basketball at the age of 4 or 5? Because of Michael Jordan? What was your first reference?
Well, my parents just signed me up to play, and I was a very active kid, and I did a lot of sports. And for some reason, basketball was always my favorite. But now, as I'm getting into liking basketball, yes, that's when Michael Jordan came on the scene, and then everybody liked basketball then, especially here in the United States. And then, of course, when he went to play for the Dream Team, then it became a global thing. From 1992 on is when the rest of the world started to love basketball as much as everyone in the United States did. So, he's so responsible, as a major puzzle piece in the reason that the game is so global right now. And, I believe a third of the NBA are international players that were born outside of the United States. That's 1/3 of the NBA. When, if you look back 25 years ago, you could count on one hand how many international players there were. And even most of those international players moved to the United States when they were younger and still grew up in the United States. Whereas today, you'll have players in the NBA that when they first start playing in the NBA, they don't even speak English. And they learn English as part of their acclimation process. And I just think that's so wonderful to see.
Wow, I loved it. It brought so many memories. On a different subject, but not that different. Let's say I'm playing basketball with my kids. Should I let them win?
Well, my philosophy is no. I don't believe in. I don't believe in letting my children win. But let me preface that with a couple of things.
That's great. I love it.
I want to make sure that when my children do win, that they earned the win. That at present, if we play just a game straight up, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I'm faster, I have more experience, I'm more skilled. There's really no way that they would be able to beat me at present. I mean, my sons are 10 years old, my daughter's 8. So if I just let them win, I don't think that's really teaching them the value of winning. Now, what we do a lot of times is I'll handicap the rules and I'll make a change so it gives them a better chance to win. So maybe I'll say, hey, I have twin sons, and say, all right, Luke and Jack, you guys can play 2-on-1 against me, and I'm only going to use my left hand. I'm a right-handed player, so I'm not as good with my left. And if we play 2-on-1 and I can only use my left hand, I'm still going to try as hard as I can to beat them. And I'm still not going to let them win, but they have a chance of beating me now because I've changed the odds. And so it's not that my kids never get to experience winning. It's just, I have to make sure that I put rules in place. If I'm going to race my kids, I'll give them a head start. So it gives them a better chance of winning, but I'm not letting them win. I'm still trying as hard as I can to beat them. And my philosophy behind that is, over time, as they get older and bigger and stronger and more skilled, then they'll start to earn more victories, and it'll be so much more rewarding for them at that point. I think too often parents just let their children win, and it almost creates this sense of entitlement. And I'm a big believer that in sport, you need to learn how to win and you need to learn how to lose. You need to be able to do both with grace and compassion and class, because in life you're going to win and you're going to lose a lot. And I want to make sure that when my kids win, that they do so very graciously and they're good sports. When they lose, they're not bad sports about it and they're not pouting and dejected, that they're actually very gracious losers as well. So I use these as opportunities for them to become better people, not just as let's see who can win this game.
That is a great way of putting it, because I believe, like Jordan Peterson says, you don't make this world a better place. You make people stronger. I mean, even though you're trying continuously to make this world a better place, obviously, but sometimes it's easier to make people stronger. And the way you talk about competition in your book is also very inspiring, because competition is what makes you deal with the loss, and that really gains or gets you leverage for when it does happen in real life. A lot of people get to, 20-year-olds or 30 years old, and they never got a no for an answer. It's really hard to see, and you can really see that the extremes really get people screwed up, right? It's very difficult to have a balance.
Absolutely. And it also helps teach, a lot of the other things that we've been talking about in this conversation, preparation and, effort and attitude. And, if I beat my kids in a game, I want them to know that if the only reason I beat them is because I'm older and more experienced and stronger, that even though it still stings and it still sucks to lose, that was outside of their control. Like, you can't necessarily control it if your opponent is simply better than you are. But then I'll ask them, did I beat you because you didn't have a good attitude and you pouted and you quit? Did I beat you because you didn't go as hard as you could go? And I want them to realize those things, because if the only reason I beat them was because they didn't give their best effort, or they had a very bad attitude, or they quit, then that's on them. That's something that I want them to process and internalize and be able to understand. And this, is I'm big in the book about controlling the controllables and your attitude and your effort. I'm a big believer that Michael Jordan was the best player to ever play the game. So if you're lined up against Michael Jordan and he beats you, you can't feel too bad about it, because he's simply better than you are. But you have to ask yourself, did I do the best I was capable of? Did I have the best attitude? And did I not quit? Did I do everything within my power to challenge him and to beat him? And that's ultimately what's most important. And that's what competitiveness is all about. So I'm much more interested in my children's ability to compete and to prepare and to have a good attitude and effort than I am with the final score. I'm not real concerned with whether they win or lose. I'm much more concerned with how they win or lose.
Getting back to self-awareness, do you remember or do you recall some of the mistakes you might have made when you started?
Well, the big turning point for me was just over 5 years ago, when I was going through a divorce, and I started to go in for some counseling and some therapy. And that's really what took my self-awareness to another level. Well, it was basically having a qualified medical professional help me see some of the blind spots that I simply didn't see. So yes, if I were to unpack my entire life, it is riddled with mistakes, with poor judgment, with things that I maybe should have known better. But I don't regret any of those decisions, because every single decision I've made in my life has led me to where I am right now. And it's kind of that butterfly effect. If I go back and I change 3 or 4 big decisions, I might not be sitting in this chair right now talking to you. And I'm very thankful for where I am in my life. I'm as happy and as fulfilled as I've ever been. We talked a little bit earlier about, COVID-19 has certainly derailed some of our normal schedules. But aside from that, life is great. I'm exactly where I want to be and who I want to be at present. Now, I'm not done yet. And this is not where I want to be or who I want to be tomorrow or 20 years from now. I want to continue to grow and to get better, but I wouldn't change a thing. And even the most painful lessons that I had to learn, I wouldn't change those, because they're helped create who and where I am now. So yeah, we could do a 20-hour podcast on all of the mistakes and boneheaded judgments that I've made in the past. But I have learned from them now. And my goal is, when you make a mistake, acknowledge it, admit your role in the mistake. So don't blame someone else. Don't deflect. Don't complain. Don't make an excuse. Own your role in the mistake. Learn from it, and then do your best not to repeat it. That's one area that I'm proud that I've made some growth. I'm certainly not perfect, but I don't make the same mistakes over and over again. I tend to make a mistake, learn from it, and then make new mistakes in the future, which I think is important.
That's one of the things that bothers me the most, when people don't learn with their mistakes, and sometimes they really got hurt a lot in those mistakes in the process, and when they don't have critical thinking, like everything that's on the internet. You just posted a meme, right? A guy with a toilet seat. I'm gonna put that later on in the conversation, guys. Yeah. I'm gonna edit this with a lot of footage and stuff. And a guy put his picture with a toilet seat and the plane, the wing from the plane on the other side.
So funny.
But it was like, just because it's on the internet, that doesn't mean it's true. But people are so. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how people are reacting to everything. It's really crazy.
Well, from a social media standpoint, there's what I have going on in my life, and then there's what I want the rest of the world to think I have going on in my life.
Yeah.
And for everybody, there's going to be a gap. For me personally, I want that gap to be as small as possible. To me, one of the best compliments I can get when I go and speak in person, or I do something like this with someone like yourself, is for them to say, man, I kind of thought I already knew you before. Like what you put on social is very similar to who you are. And to me, that's a great compliment. Now, with the exception of putting a couple of pictures of my children up every now and then, I choose not to share very much in my personal life. Like I don't put a lot about relationships and so forth. And that's my own preference. But outside of that, I choose to be very transparent on social media. I do my very best to make sure that I'm living the type of stuff that I'm putting out on social media. Anyone that's followed me for a while knows that I get very irritated with people that don't return their shopping carts. So to me, the biggest fear I have in the world is that you would see me in person doing something different than I'm talking about on social media. So if you happen to be here in the States and you see me leave my shopping cart abandoned in a parking space, then all of a sudden you'd go, man, Alan says all of this on social and he doesn't even live those same values. He talks all the time about eating healthy and getting sleep. And I just watched him go through the McDonald's drive-thru and get 3 Big Macs. Like that's my biggest fear. So I work really hard to authentically and organically make sure that everything I put on social is the stuff that I'm living, because I don't want there to be any gap between those things. If I'm giving a keynote talk about how important it is to care about human beings and to be thoughtful and to be kind, and then later that night, one of the attendees sees me cursing at a waiter, they're going to be like, man, that guy was a phony. Everything he said on stage was purely BS. And I don't ever want to be that type of person. So I love when people come up and say, hey, man, you're exactly like you are on social. I pictured.
Yeah, like I pictured. Compliment. That's great. That's great. Because I heard that, Ellen DeGeneres, I heard that when she goes to parties, doesn't dance.
Really? I would have never guessed that.
The intro to her show. She's always dancing a lot. And somebody saw her in a party. She was sitting down. She was like, oh, man, that bullshit artist.
That's funny.
I heard that. I was like, that's funny. That's funny, but it's true. She might go to every party there is and not dance. So it's like, you're being a phony.
Yeah,
I heard that once, and I was like, "That's so funny."
Say, and you probably have great experience with this, given your work in movies as a stuntman and so forth. I do think there is tremendous pressure on people that are celebrities and famous athletes, because I'll use for an example someone like Kevin Durant. I've known Kevin since he was a teenager, and he might after a game sign 99 autographs in a row. And then he goes to jump on the bus, and the 100th person that didn't get an autograph now thinks poorly of him and now thinks that he's not a good guy. Well, he didn't sign an autograph for me, so he's a jerk. It's like, well, he signed 99 of them before you got there. He
Yeah.
had to go. So that's the other part that I do have very high empathy for those folks that, because one thing that I tell everyone all the time, on social, I choose not to post any negativity. I don't post gossip. I don't post disparaging thoughts. Even if I think them,
Hmm.
I don't want my platforms to be associated with negativity. So what I put out on social is always very optimistic and positive. But I want to make sure people know that I myself am not optimistic and positive every second of every day. I get angry, I get frustrated, I get disappointed, I get anxious, and I allow myself to feel those things. I take ownership of those feelings. I try to dissect why I'm feeling that way, but I don't let it affect my behavior. So that's another thing that I want to make sure that people know. That's where that disconnect sometimes happens. Is if you follow me on social,
Hmm.
you'll think that I'm positive all of the time. And while I am positive a good portion of time, especially during COVID-19, there have been times where I've been disappointed or frustrated or a little bit worried about the future. But I don't let those emotions change my behavior. If I would have been feeling a little bit down before this call started, I wouldn't treat you poorly just because I was feeling a little bit frustrated. I'm able to say, okay, I'm frustrated, but I can't let that affect my behavior. Now it's time to jump on a call and be my best self. So it's not about suppressing or resisting emotions. It's being able to manage them in that way.
Hmm.
So that's the other thing. If you and I were to hang out for a week and you noticed that I was a little irritated by something, that would be the reason. Now I choose not to go put that on social media
Yeah.
because enough people already do that. And
Hmm.
I want to
Hmm.
use those platforms in a way that's positive and attracts really good people. But I also want people to know there is a human side to this. And I'm far from perfect. And I'm definitely not happy and positive every second of every day.
And it's funny we're talking about this. It's not funny. It's a coincidental because we just lost here in Portugal a great actor because he apparently committed suicide in a beach somewhere here in Portugal with 5 kids. And I worked with him like 10 times, and he was such a nice guy who was always smiling, always treating everybody very well. But apparently he was already saying in interviews that I did not read the interviews, those flash magazines and whatever, jet set
Yeah.
magazines. And they were talking about how he was a little bit depressed, how he went to see a therapist because of past relationships, or the money wasn't enough on this time because of some lack of work. But he was always working, so I'm not sure if everybody's always jumping on the bad wagon he was going bankrupt, everything was going bad with his finance. But it's like, I'm not sure. I mean, sometimes you might get into this dark place when people really don't know you, and they only seen your laughter, and they've only seen what you posted on Instagram and on social media, or what you show in TV shows or soap operas or movies or whatnot. But deep down, he might have been a very, very depressed guy. And he was saying in an interview that whenever he had no work, it was not for the money, because he could actually use the vacation time. But after 1 week or two, it's like, I don't have an objective anymore, because most of his kids were already grown up to the point where he didn't really need to clean up their diapers. But it was still really hard to, after the victory or after the accomplishment of another TV show, what am I going to do next? So a lot of the times these freelance careers, like athletes or like actors, or stuntmen, not so much, but like actors and the people like Ellen, just like we talked about in terms of Ellen, in terms of what she does. I mean, it's such a high pressure each step of the way that whenever you stop a little bit, it's like, I have no goals right now. It's really scary, right? Did you ever encounter that type of anxiety/depression on athletes who might have been, like, for example, injured for the year or something?
Oh, absolutely. It's the hardest part. It's when somebody's identity is directly tied to what they do. Then it becomes very scary when they stop doing that thing. You
Yeah.
just said it perfectly. If you've associated yourself as a basketball player as a kid, and then in high school, and then in college, and then play professionally, then when you retire, you don't really know who you are anymore. And, I'm very thankful. And COVID-19 has actually really helped reinforce this to me, that speaking is what I do. It's not who I am. I haven't been able to be on stage for the last 12 weeks. And at the time of this recording, I probably won't be on stage for another 12 weeks. But that hasn't shaken my identity. I still know in my heart, I am a coach. I'm someone that tries to serve others and fill buckets. And I just happen to do that through speaking. But I've been very fortunate to not lose any identity. I can only imagine, especially with all of the professional athletes and their seasons being, severely postponed, if not canceled, that would kind of cause that. And yeah, that's really, really tough. So I think all of us should be soul searching to our core to really figure out who we are, so that we can use that and pivot that identity in any direction that we want. And, yes, you made a great point that a lot of times the people that are showing up as incredibly positive and happy on social are really dealing with some dark demons on their own, and are feeling depressed and so forth. I know I've felt those range of emotions myself. Thankfully, I've got a good internal system here of people in my inner circle that I can confide in, that I can have these talks to. These are the people that know, all right, Alan's down in the dumps right now. The rest of the world doesn't know it because I'm choosing to put out only positive stuff, but I have an outlet where I can cope and I can work on those things. So I don't isolate myself completely. I want to make sure that I'm able, to have these protective mechanisms and insulated with support. So when I am feeling a little bit down, I've got people that I can count on to really help me. So, it was very similar, especially here in the States, however long ago that was. Robin Williams, the famous comedian and the famous actor. You're talking about one of the funniest people in the world. And all of his movies were so uplifting and positive. And yet inside, he was really hurting and really, really depressed, and no one really saw that coming. So that's even more reason why, as human beings, we should constantly be keeping an eye on our brothers, reaching out and being kind and thoughtful, and try to notice,
So you believe
if a friend of yours is feeling a little off, like, reach out and help them, because they might not feel comfortable asking for your help. They might not even know that they need help. But that's why it's so important that we're always trying to be of service.
Yeah. So you would say that everybody should have their own escape pipes, whether it be friends, family, hobbies, other stuff to process. If not, instead of just or not being only their main profession, right?
Yes. Well, I'm a big believer everybody should have a therapist. We especially here in the States, most people view therapy as something you go to once things are broken. If your marriage is going really poorly, you go see a marriage counselor. If you get really depressed, you go see a therapist. And I believe we should be using therapy in a preventative way to say, hey, my marriage is great, but I want to keep it great. So I'm going to go see a marriage counselor. I'm not feeling depressed right now, but I know that I could in the future. So let me go work with a therapist to give me the tools.
Does anybody do that? That's great, but does anybody do that? Not so much, right?
Unfortunately, they don't do it as much as they should.
Yeah.
But even from a fitness standpoint, why should I wait until I'm out of shape to hire you as my personal trainer? Why don't I hire you to keep me in great shape so that never happens in the first place? And I think oftentimes there's a stigma attached with therapy and with counseling, and that people think that, well, there's something wrong with you if you need to go see a therapist. So yes, so until we change that narrative, until people realize that seeing a therapist is no different than seeing a personal trainer, seeing your accountant, going in for your annual checkup with the doctor, seeing a massage therapist. There's no stigma around massage therapy. People go get massages so that they can perform better and feel better. Well, the same thing with a therapist. In fact, a therapist will help you feel better and perform better, probably better than any other vocation out there. But there's just this stigma attached, and I think that prevents a lot of people from doing it.
Alan, I'm not going to take you much more time because you have a lot to do, obviously, but I would really want, and I know you told this story a million times, but I love your Kobe Bryant story. Could you tell our Portuguese and Brazilian audience?
Oh, I'd be happy to.
That
Well,
is amazing.
it's hard for me to believe that it's already been well over a decade, but back in 2007, Nike flew me out to Los Angeles to work the first ever Kobe Bryant Skills Academy. Nike brought in the top high school and college players from around the country for an intense 3-day mini camp with the best player in the world. And I don't know how many of your listeners follow basketball closely, but they do need to know that in 2007, Kobe was the best player in the game. Well, as I told you all earlier, basketball was my first identifiable passion. And having grown up in this basketball bubble, I had always heard the urban legend of how insanely intense Kobe's individual workouts were. Well, now that I was on his camp staff, I figured this was my chance. This was my shot. So at my earliest opportunity, I walked up to Kobe and asked if I could watch one of his private workouts. He was incredibly gracious and smiled and said, "Sure, man, no problem. I'm going tomorrow at 4." And I got a little bit confused because I had just got done looking through the camp schedule, and the camp schedule clearly said that the first workout with the players was the following day at 3:30. Well, Kobe recognized that confused look on my face, and he clarified that with, "Yeah, that's 4 a.m."
Wow.
Well, I wasn't smart enough or quick enough to come up with a reason on why I couldn't be somewhere at 4 in the morning. So I'd committed myself to being there. And I figured if I'm going to be there anyway, I may as well try and impress Kobe. I may as well show him how serious of a trainer I was. So I came up with the plan to beat him to the gym. So I set my alarm for 3 a.m. The alarm goes off. I jump up. I get myself dressed. I hop in a cab and I head to the gym. And when I arrive, it's 3:30 in the morning. So it's pitch black outside. And yet the moment I step out of the cab, I can see that the gym lights are already on. From the parking lot, I can faintly hear a ball bouncing and sneakers squeaking. When I walked in the side door of the gym, Kobe was already in a full sweat.
Oh my!
He was going through an intense warm up before his scheduled workout with his trainer started at 4. Out of professional courtesy, I didn't say anything to him. I didn't say anything to his trainer. I just sat down to watch. And for the first 45 minutes, I was shocked. For the first 45 minutes, I watched the best player in the world do the most basic footwork in offensive moves. Kobe was doing stuff that I had routinely taught to middle school age players. Now, let's not get it twisted. This was Kobe Bryant. So he was doing everything in an unparalleled level of intensity. He was doing everything with surgical precision. But the stuff he was doing was incredibly basic. Well, his whole workout lasted a few hours, and when it was over, once again, I didn't say anything to him. I didn't say anything to his trainer. I just quietly left. But my curiosity eventually got the best of me, and I had to know. So later that day at camp, I went up to him and said, "Kobe, I don't understand. You're the best player in the world. Why are you doing such basic drills?" And he smiled, and he said with all seriousness, "Why do you think I'm the best player in the world? Because I never get bored with the basics." I never get bored with the basics. Kobe Bryant, the best player on the planet and someone that has truly mastered his craft, said his secret was that he never gets bored with the basics. And as obvious as that may sound to your listeners right now, that was a life-changing lesson for me. It was at that moment that I realized that just because something's basic, it doesn't mean that it's easy. Those are not synonyms, and yet people often use those words interchangeably. Just because it's basic doesn't mean it's easy. If it was easy, everyone else would be doing it. And as you know, we're often told that we can skip steps, that we should be looking for some type of shortcut or hack. But anytime we do that, we're making a huge mistake because the basics work. They always have, and they always will.
Oh, man. Stick to the
I
basics.
love that story. I've told it a million times, and I never get tired of it. That story was so impactful in my life.
Man, it's amazing, and it's such a huge loss. I could not believe it when I heard it. It's like, oh man, it's like how screwed up is 2020, you know, right? How screwed up is this year being?
Yeah.
And what about the rallies? I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I was just going to say, as somebody that tries to be incredibly positive, I mean, you know, we had the loss of Kobe Bryant, which certainly shook up people outside of basketball. I mean, he had such an impact. It wasn't like just basketball fans were hurt. You know, an entire world mourned his loss. And then we went right to COVID-19, which is completely unprecedented. You know, we've never seen anything shut down the entire world the way that the coronavirus has. And then here in the United States, where we've been experiencing, some police brutality and racial injustice and social inequalities, and there's protests all over our country right now. I mean, It has been a very, very challenging year. But what I choose to view the silver lining as is, can we find something good from each of those things? You look at Kobe Bryant, someone that literally looks like an immortal superhero, and the lesson I pull from that is, time is not promised. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Let's make sure we live every day to the best of our ability, because we never know when it's going to be over. And we shouldn't live in fear of death, but we should make sure that we're getting the most out of every day, because none of us know when death's going to come knocking. As far as COVID-19, as challenging as that may have been, it's allowed me personally to take a breath and to reset and to focus on connecting more with my children and prepare new content that I'll be able to share on stages and in my second book. Like, it's allowed me to do things that I wouldn't have done if the world would have just kept going. And then, of course, with the social unrest we're feeling here in the United States, I'm hoping that serves as the wake-up call to end systemic racism here, especially in the United States, and to improve some of these social inequalities, change some of the policies and laws that have really been hurting disenfranchised groups. So as awful as some of the police brutality has been, hopefully that stuff is not in vain, and that actually is the spark that creates the type of change that will allow our world to be a much better place. So as hard as 2020 has been, if we take the lessons from it and use the lessons from it, we can make sure that 2021 and every year after that are the best of our lives. And I'm very committed to doing that myself. And that's how I'm choosing to view this world, or view this year. It's been a tough year, no doubt. But I think this is going to be one of the most important years, not only of my life, but of everybody's life.
No, let's hope it sparks change and it doesn't just get forgotten. Like, sometimes it's very much a human being characteristic, which is to often forget. Just like we forget about history. And I always find a little metaphor in what happened to me once. Me and my girlfriend 2 years ago, we went to Hong Kong, and then first we went to Indonesia. And in Indonesia, in the island of Lombok, we were having a massage, mind you, and an earthquake started, and it was like 7.2 or something. A lot of people died in that earthquake. So I was like, oh, imagine being almost butt naked and seeing all the world falling apart. Even the massage therapist, the Indonesian girl, she was like, she ran away. Fuck this guy, she ran away. I was like, what? Oh. It took me a while to realize what was going on. Everybody was screaming. And when you see the locals being scared, it's like, okay, this is the real shit. So I was really, really scared. And we ran to our hotel. And as soon as we were getting to the hotel, it was nighttime, so we couldn't see shit. And people were saying, people from the hotel with the yellow vests were saying, go to the hill, tsunami. And I was like, oh my God, no. I thought this was over. I was going to go to the hotel. I was going to get some sleep and not think about this ever again. Yeah. And you're in, I shouldn't say this, but third world country, whatever. You're in not as developed country as we would love it to be, obviously. But when that stuff happens and you're there, it's like, okay, now you get a sense that it does not just happen to others. And a lot of people who were actually in another island called Gili Island, they were there. And even if, long story short, there was no tsunami. So like an hour later of being in the mountains without seeing anything, all butt naked, right? in my shorts, a guy from the hotel went over there and said, okay, there's no tsunami, but we have to go down because it's going to be a replica and it might be as strong as the first one. It was quite strong, but not as strong. So we got through it. We survived, obviously. But everybody who was on the island in Gili Island, it was a plain island with no mountains, no hills. So they were like, they got the earthquake, and from there, they could not go anywhere. So people with their kids, imagine being with your whole family in an island which is flat. And if there is a tsunami, like everybody's saying that there might be, I mean, you're going to for sure die, because it's like you can't go anywhere. You can't go up the hill. There's no hill. So those people were in shock, and I met a few of them who managed to get out of that island on the day after we were at the airport. I managed to watch some of them, and the kids were like all like, they were, like pale, like watching, like they didn't even have a reaction because they were really in shock. And but one of the biggest analogies that I remind myself sometimes is that the next day, everybody was going to work like nothing happened, like everybody in their motorbikes, in their scooters. And I was like, I almost died for this. It's like, I mean, people are like, okay, it's a regular day, just like any other day. Like 2 days or 3 days afterwards, people were jamming up boats to go to Gili Island, in which people had their worst nightmare ever awake. Yeah. And I was like, what in the world? I mean, people, it's like, it's good that sometimes we forget about the hardships, but sometimes it's like, I hope we manage to keep our lives going and with optimism like those people have, but not forgetting what we went through. Because sometimes if we forget too fast, the shit might hit the fan. And with COVID and with virus and with illness specifically, it might be, I don't know. I'm struggling to find optimism in that, because I know it's human nature not to be mindful at all times, and sometimes we forget about the hardships we went through. But you really helped me with this conversation, being a little bit more optimistic. So I want to thank you, Alan, so much for this time. I hope I haven't screwed your schedule with this, because it went along.
Oh no, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I'm so glad that we finally connected. I appreciate your support so much, and this was a lot of fun. And I look forward to this airing, and I'll certainly amplify it and share it to all of my followers, because I really applaud the work you're doing and wish you continued success.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, and I hope everything gets a little better. So I mean, right now you said you're not doing a lot of you're not doing keynote speaks. What do you call it? Keynote speaks?
Yeah, not doing any keynote talks in person, but I've been doing a lot of this type of virtual stuff, which has really been fun and enjoying it. And I've been focused on putting out more social content. So, certainly anyone that's watching or listening to this, I'm at Alan Stein Jr. On Instagram or any of the major social channels. Please drop me a line. We can continue some discussions. If you do have an interest in the book, folks can go to raiseyourgamebook.com, or you can get it on Audible if you'd rather listen to it. And then everything else about me is just at alansteinjr.com. So I'm hoping this is not the end of our conversation. This is just the beginning of many future conversations with you and with all of your listeners and viewers.
I hope so too. And guys, don't forget to check out his podcast as well, which is called Raise Your Game, right? It's the same name.
Yes, sir.
And I just heard two of them, and the last one was with Mark Cuban. So kudos on that one. Was he too fast that you had to the guy? He's like on fire at all times. And it's like, it was quick. It's like each minute is so full of knowledge that it's like, okay, I got to listen to this like 10 times more to get everything that he was putting out there.
Absolutely. No, I went back and watched that one that we videotaped it originally. Yeah, several times, because he does move very quick. But first season of the podcast had, Kevin Durant, Mark Cuban, Jay Billis, some pretty good names on there. So yeah, folks are looking for another show to listen to. You can check out the Raise Your Game show.
Alan, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
You got it, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. Later.